Hey guys, it's Katya here. Welcome back to the channel and welcome everyone who's new. In today's video, I'm sharing a little time-lapse of a bookmark painting I created. The full tutorial is actually fully narrated and in real time on my Patreon. And the thing about it is that for the first week after publication, so from today, it's completely free for everyone, both free and paid members. Free and paid members, and after that first week it will go into the treasure box where only paying members will have access to it. So if you'd like to grab the free line art and follow along step by step, head over to Patreon and I'll leave the link in the description. You can either use my line art or create your own drawing, which would be amazing if you'd like to try a different idea. For this piece, I painted with acrylic gouache and colored pencils, and I can't wait to share how it turned out. I worked on Fabriano mixed media paper, which is 250 grams, so it's nice and thick. Because acrylic gouache doesn't require a lot of water, the paper doesn't warp much at all, and this was actually my very first time creating a full painting with acrylic gouache. Before this, I only made color swatches and some color mixes, and I was really scared to use this medium because I really hated gouache when I was a kid and I had to attend art school and it was a nightmare. I always failed the class. So this piece was very much an experiment and I was honestly so happy with the results and with the way it felt to actually be painting it. I worked on an A4 size paper because I wanted to scan it later and print the bookmark in the exact size I wanted, so it's bigger than a normal bookmark. And I also like keeping my original artwork as a kind of diary, a way to look back and see how my illustrations evolve, how much style changes, and how I improve over time. The paper is also acid-free, by the way, which is important because paired with Liquitex acrylic gouache, which is light fast, the artwork won't fade. But you can get Holbein, for example, that is also light fast, and maybe some other brands have light fast acrylic gouache. So if you want to create an actual painting instead of just a bookmark, you could definitely use this combo as well and frame it, and the colors would stay vibrant for years. Now, what's special about acrylic gouache compared to the traditional gouache? The biggest difference is that the color doesn't shift when it dries. With normal gouache, the hue often changes, so it gets lighter or darker once dry. But acrylic gouache stays exactly the same as when it's wet, and it dries really quickly. That is a huge win for me. So it's a very cool alternative to watercolor for me because it takes a long time to dry it and it warps the paper quite a lot. Of course, it's not the same result, but gouache at the end of the day is an opaque watercolor. So yeah, another thing is about building layers. When you build layers with watercolor at a certain point, or with traditional gouache, the color is gonna start to lift and mix and make muddy mixes. But with acrylic gouache, it's not gonna happen. Once it's dry, it's dry. So if this thing dries so quickly, you might think, how can you keep working with it? That's where the wet palette comes in. I'll show you my setup, but basically it keeps your paint moist for hours. It's just a tray with wet kitchen towels underneath and some baking paper, and you can see it in the tutorial, and it works for both acrylic and acrylic gouache. For example, one day I had to stop painting and leave my palette uncovered in my kind of makeshift studio. It was over 33 degrees Celsius here, but the next day, you will not believe it, like 24 hours later, the paints were still liquid and I could continue painting as if I had just squeezed them out of the tube. So that is a lifesaver because it's quite expensive and I got the paint with a big discount, so I'm very happy about that. So when it comes to the painting process, I started with the background and worked forward from it. That way I could manage the shapes of the smaller foreground objects, painting them on top of the background. The beauty of gouache is its opacity. You can layer light colors over the dark and cover them completely. With traditional gouache though, if you add too many layers, the paint can lift off, as I said, and it's similar to watercolor. This happens with watercolor as well. So acrylic gouache behaves more like acrylic paint. Once it's dry, it's permanent. You can keep layering without lifting, and it creates such an interesting texture. You can use it completely wet, or you can use it very opaque, like literally from the tube, because Liquitex is quite liquid and it's very opaque, and using it from the tube even without water, and it covers perfectly. I found that for me, 2 layers worked perfect with the thickness of the paint that I was using, and it gives me the coverage that I want while still keeping a very lovely texture. For the sketch, I worked digitally in Procreate, then printed it out in a light brown color so the lines could peek through the painting. That was done on purpose. This was inspired by Beatrice Blue. She often lets her line art shine kind of through the gouache layers, and I know that she used this technique creating her last book, and this creates a subtle variation in color and texture, and yeah, I kind of copy-pasted it here. And I started with the seal after I was done with the background, since he was the next largest shape, and then I moved on to the next biggest element, the kelp he's hugging. For the kelp, I mixed 2 shades of green to make it look twisty and varied, adding more life to the piece. I also placed the kelp diagonally rather than straight up or down, because diagonal elements always add more movement and dynamism to a composition. So anytime you want to add a bit of movement, a bit of more interesting composition, use diagonal kind of patterns. Another thing I noticed about working with acrylic gouache is that since it dries so quickly, I could paint it in any order I wanted. Normally, I try to work from top left to bottom right, not to smudge anything since I'm right-handed, but here I could jump around the page without worrying about smudging. Later in the process, I added colored pencils, and honestly, this is where the magic really happened. The combination of gouache texture and colored pencil texture is just beautiful. You can get the brush strokes of the paint, the texture of the paper, and then the soft layering of pencil on top, so depending on the pressure you put. And to get the best effect, I deliberately used blunt pencils instead of sharp ones, and I used mainly Prismacolor pencils with some of Faber-Castell polychromos, and that way the gouache layer underneath could shine through, because when you use a sharp pencil, it gets into those crevices more and it kind of takes away the texture. So the whole painting took me about 2 days, and since the illustration was mainly cool blues and greens, I decided to add some warm accents for balance, and it was really scary to add those oranges, the peachy color, to the fish, but I used a scarlet gouache, it's called Scarlet in Liquitex, to add little spots on the seal. I kind of mixed the toned down purple to add those spots, and if I had chosen a different red, I think I would have ended up with a more vibrant purple, but I wanted something softer and more muted. That same purple mixed with gray that I created from all my blues and white became the color for the fish, so I mean the same scarlet color that I also toned down, and it tied the palette together while making the whole image more interesting. For the eyes, I covered them with white gouache so the whole painting would have consistent texture, no bare paper showing through. I also included a little life hack for painting bubbles. The final touches on those bubbles were done with colored pencils to give them that magical transparent feeling. So if you'd like to see how to paint bubbles, definitely check out the tutorial. And one more thing I really loved about acrylic gouache is how well it holds colored pencil on top of it. The blending feels like seamless, and it integrates right into the gouache layer. Honestly, it made the whole process such a joy. It might not be a perfect piece, but I can tell you that I had so much fun creating it. The paint felt like butter going onto the paper, and the pencils added this extra sparkle and extra brilliance, and it made me fall in love with painting again, to be honest, in traditional media. The only hiccup was my phone. On the second day, part of the footage came out a little blurry. I have a very old phone, and yeah, but if you watch the real-time narrated version on Patreon, you'll get all the details explained clearly. I hope that kind of recovers a bit the whole phone situation. So also for the details, the only time I actually used the sharpened pencil was the seal's face, the eyes, and whiskers. The eyes have to be quite clear, so that's the only time that I actually sharpened my pencil. And even then, I didn't use black, I used the dark blue. And after that, I kept shading and enhancing different areas with Prismacolor pencils, adding depth and details to the fish. And that's it. That's my bookmark. I've already scanned it, and I'll be printing it out in a smaller format so I can actually use it in my books that I'm reading. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to try the tutorial and share your results, please tag me on Instagram. You'll find the link in my profile and also under this video. I would absolutely love to see what you create. You can also draw your own illustration and use your own design. Also, don't forget you can download the line art for this exact illustration on my Patreon in the first post about the tutorial, and it's free for the first week, so grab it while you can, and I can't wait to see your results or even your own unique versions. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon in the next video. So yeah, have a wonderful day everyone, and bye.